Knowing how to understand and fix lateral pelvic tilt can be really confusing to the untrained eye, but I want to use this video to help you understand some underlying common themes between different types of lateral pelvic tilt and what it generally means to give you a better idea of how you can go about improving the position of your pelvis and the rest of your body. Many common fixes for lateral pelvic tilt you see on the internet have to do with addressing the muscles of the pelvis or doing certain stretches to help activate or shut things off. But the problem with that is that lateral pelvic tilt isn't a problem with the pelvis necessarily. It is an entire body issue. Let's think about why we would actually have a hip higher on one side in the first place. If my hip is higher on one side, then I'm probably going to have a lower shoulder on that side in many but not all cases. This is a very common standard presentation of lateral pelvic tilt. When you compare these mechanics of the standard lateral pelvic tilt presentation with what happens when we shift into stance phase of gait or mid-stance phase of gait on one side when we're moving through the gait cycle, it's actually remarkably similar. Let's understand what happens in mid-stance by starting with how we get there, beginning with early stance. Now, in early stance, we have the leg out in front of us and the arm behind us, and our trunk is turned towards that side. As we strike the ground with our rear foot, we're going to begin to shift our body weight over to that side. And as that happens, we're going to need to shift from external rotation in early stance to internal rotation in mid stance. So as that leg comes underneath us, this hip rotates posteriorly and into an internally rotated position, and the femur moves into an internally rotated position as that hip just ever so slightly is higher than the one on the other side. As we bring the other arm through, because it was behind us, as we bring it through, that shoulder is going to move down ever so slightly lower than the other side. And as that happens, the head is relatively going to tilt towards the opposite side. Do you see how now this is quite similar to a lateral pelvic tilt position? Usually in a lateral pelvic tilt position, that higher hip side is in an internally rotated position, while the other side is more forward in a relatively externally rotated position. By the way, this is exactly what's going on when we're moving through the gait cycle. As we're in stance leg, internal rotation on one side, the other side is in swing or external rotation. So the point is lateral pelvic tilt is a static representation of us being shifted over to one side of our body. And we're basically occupying more space on the side that's higher. And this is in most, but not all cases. I need to talk about the baseline before we understand layers of compensation that often happen on top of that. Now, this baseline I'm referring to is actually quite predictable and common. Humans are naturally asymmetrical, and we do tend to have a bias towards shifting towards the right side. There's a reason why many people are right-hand dominant, 90% or more. And you can learn more about this underlying pattern that I don't have time to get into in this video by clicking the link above and also down below in the description. This is referred to as the left AIC pattern. What tends to happen in this left AIC pattern is we tend to be shifted over to the right side with a higher, more internally rotated right hip, a lower, more internally rotated and forward right shoulder. And on the left side, we have a higher, more externally rotated left shoulder and a lower, more externally rotated and forward left hip. Up top, we tend to see the head side bent to the left side. So I encourage you to shift your perspective away from lateral pelvic tilt being this issue with muscles or you need to stretch stuff out into more of this idea of this is an entire systemic thing where we are shifted over to one side, which represents stance phase of gait. Therefore, in order to address this issue, it would make more sense for us to learn how to shift genuinely over to the other side of our body, the left side most commonly, and learn how to push out of our right side. If we're taking this gait lens to things, then we need to learn how to get more propulsion or push out of our right side, more late stance and external rotation, and learn how to get more earlier to mid stance mechanics on the left side, more internal rotation. If you have a higher left hip and or a lower left shoulder, then I would encourage you to check out my video on what to do if you don't fit the left AIC pattern. I have a lot more information there of what could be going on. But essentially there's usually two things going on in these additional layers of compensation. To put it simply, either we are so far oriented into right stance that this left hip comes more and more forward and then comes up and over the top, or what's happening is we're seeking a strategy to move back to the left side. So what tends to happen is we try to push out of the right side, but we're not very good at that. So we basically just push the right hip down and shove the left hip up in an attempt to get more into stance phase on the left side. In this common presentation, we're often more forward on the left side and turned right. So because of that, we tend to have this presentation of our foot arches where we're lower on the left and higher on the right because we're shifting over to the right side. Now, we tend to have more weight on the forefoot of our left foot and rear foot of the right foot. So we want to learn how to sense our left heel better and push off with our right foot arch better. So that way, when we push from right to left, we can get on our left heel more easily. So it's important that when we move through these exercises or get into these exercises, we're really sensing and feeling the right foot cues, because that helps integrate top down from the hip to the pelvis, getting the joints in the right positions, and from the bottom up, getting the foot to help interact with the hip properly. Muscles that help you shift into and hold yourself in left stance are also really important here. A couple important ones would be your left hamstring and inner thigh adductor muscles, which help get you to shift over to the left side, rotate that hip back, and get the femur to move in. Also, your left side abs or obliques help get the ribs to come down and also rotate your hip back and secure that left shoulder in a lower position as well. In many cases, it's important to start easy and learn how to shift into our left side more effectively, and we can do that with a basic exercise like this. This is the right side lying left adductor pullback from Postural Restoration Institute. The purpose of this is to recruit some adductor and drive some internal rotation on this top side leg right here, along with the oblique on the left side. So to set up, we want to be 90-90, meaning that we have our knees bent at a 90-degree angle and also our hips bent at a 90-degree angle. And then we want to make sure that our feet are in line with our knees, that are in line with our hips here. And then we want to start with some sort of object in between our knees. A ball works really well here, or some sort of pillow works really well, as long as you can press down on it and it can squeeze a little bit. So first, what I want you to do, Trevor, is reach for the wall with your left hand. Very good. Supporting his head with his right arm. And then give me a nice slight hip tuck right here. And then as you inhale, focus on keeping both feet flat, but focus on the left heel in particular as you pull this left knee back. And exhale, push down. Get all the air out as you push down. This is only about a 5 out of 10 push right here. It's not a max effort. He should feel these left obliques work as he finishes out that full exhale for about 5 to 8 seconds. As he feels these left obliques, he's going to inhale through his nose, shift back, keeping the tension in his left abs, and exhale, push down again. If he can't get the left knee back, he's going to have the conscious intention to do that, and that will still allow him to recruit the adductor and maintain the position that we're looking for. We're also sensing more pressure in our left rear foot and heel, because that is what we're missing in terms of our ability to shift over to the left side. And also we're reaching down with the left arm, which is going to get us, yes, some side abs on that side, but it's also going to help us naturally, subtly shift our head into this slightly right side bent position. On the right side, it's important to learn how to push out of that side. And we can do that usually with muscles that are external rotators and muscles of propulsion, such as the rear fibers of your glute med, but also the glute max, which helps create external rotation of the hip and femur to help push you out of that side and get your pelvis to face the left. The setup for this, we want to be in a position where we are far enough away from the wall to where this leg, when extended, can be about 15% unlocked. And underneath the left side here, we have a mat, something about 2 to 3 inches, no more than that. 1 inch could even work, just to support the knee, but also that will help create a higher left hip slightly to create that turn into that left side. And also we want the left knee bent at about 110 to 120 degrees of hip flexion. That would be relative to his trunk position right here, making an angle like so. So in this starting position here, he's got his palms up, forearms flat on the ground, and he also has his elbows in line with just above his left knee. He's going to feel on this wall with his right foot. his heel, specifically the inner heel, the ball of the big toe, and the ball of the little toe, but he's going to focus on pressing into the wall with the ball of the big toe, but specifically the heel and the inside edge there. So Trevor, what I want you to do first is I want you to extend this back, get a little bit of an arch. Now, we want to create the tuck of the pelvis through the pressure into the wall. So you can notice here that this knee is not locked out yet. So we want to extend the knee, and that should create that slight hip tuck as he drives that inner heel and ball of the big toe into the wall. If he does that well, he's going to feel a ton of lower right glute right here. And then he's going to push away from the floor with those elbows to get these ribs back a little bit. Good. And his sternum is still facing directly down. It's not overly depressed. It's still just facing directly down at the floor here. The right knee is 10 to 15% unlocked. And then he's just going to breathe through this position. Exhale nice and soft, really, really soft until he feels his side abs engage, probably more on the left side here, but also a little bit on the right. And then as he inhales through his nose, he's going to keep a little bit of that tension in those side abs, and he should feel some expansion all through this part of his back. And then he's just going to do that for the prescribed amount of repetitions. Hopefully this helps you understand why a lot of people, potentially including yourself, may be struggling with a lot of these stretch and strengthen approaches. My programs, like my beginner body restoration program, address the underlying problems of how the positions of the joints are throwing off the ability of the muscles to do their jobs at certain points. What we would want to do is progressively work you into a position where we are going to get you in left stance phase, which represents the inverse mechanics of this left AIC pattern. That would be a slightly higher, more internally rotated left hip, a lower, more internally rotated left shoulder with the head very slightly side bent to the other side. This is the standing left AFIR with resisted left arm pull down from Postural Restoration Institute. What we're gonna do to set up here is get a relatively light band attached to something tall like a door frame. A rack works really well. Whatever allows you to get a moderate amount of tension as we begin this push down. I would say no more than about a 4 out of 10 is what we're looking for. So we got this band, and now we're gonna get in a slightly staggered stance so that our right foot midfoot is in line with our left toes. But here's what we need to do first is bend both knees, get a little bit of knee flexion, and then we're gonna shift over to the left side without losing our right foot coming off the floor. So what we got here is most of our weight on our left foot, and we're focusing on the left outside heel, but we're not doing that at the cost of losing our first metatarsal head on the right, the ball of the foot under the big toe, or the ball of the foot underneath the little toe. So leaning back on the left, soft knee bend. We're going to tuck the hips to make sure that we have a nice neutral pelvis. Now we're gonna take that band and reach it down. So we have an active side bend to the left, 3 or 4 out of 10 intensity, but that is going to cause our left shoulder to drop. Now, because the left shoulder is dropped, we need to make sure that our eyes stay perfectly neutral ahead. We don't want to side bend our head to the left or to the right too much. We want to make sure that because our eyes are staying neutral, yes, we are slightly side bent to the right, but we shouldn't be cranked over here. It's only at the cost of whatever allows us to keep our eyes straight ahead. Okay, to recap, we have most of our weight on our left heel. Pushing down with the band, eyes neutral, that should give us our left abs. So now what we need to do is make sure that the knee on the left goes in very slightly. That should give us a little bit of left inner thigh, and the hip should be slightly outside of the knee. So we have the left abs, left inner thigh, maybe some left outside hip if we're lucky. And we're gonna sit here and breathe. In through our nose, out through our mouth, making sure the tension on the band stays down, 3 to 4 out of 10. In through our nose, out through our mouth for about 5 breaths. The most common mistake here by far is people will lock out their left knee. You're going to lose that left stance we're going after if you lock out that left knee. So keep a soft bend at the knee at all times, focusing on that left heel. And the other thing is that people have a tendency to lose their left arm positioning. It should be down in line with your trunk, not behind it too much. And also when people inhale through their nose, because they're so used to hiking up their left side, they will have a tendency to inhale and let that come up. So make sure you're keeping tension down on the band as you inhale through your nose.